In this new generation of Shonen Jump authors, one stands at the forefront, Tatsuki Fujimoto, creator of the insanely popular Chainsaw Man. It's almost impossible to be a part of today's anime sphere and not hear this man's name. His current series, Chainsaw Man, became the 5th best-selling manga series in 2021, selling over 4 million copies, all before even having an anime adaptation, which is almost unheard of. The popularity of many Shonen Jump series normally begin to grow exponentially after an anime adaptation is released, especially in the West. So what made Chainsaw Man stand out and grow in popularity even before it received an adaptation? I think this is all thanks to Fujimoto's aloof and yet palpably empathetic writing. When comparing Fujimoto's works to other popular properties in Shonen Jump, there's something different. So for example, let's compare, on face value, Chainsaw Man and My Hero Academia. Hero Aka appears as a typical shonen property, being a clear evolution and step forward in the usual presentations within shonen, such as friendships and personal growth. Looking at Chainsaw Man, its presentation is a bit more gruesome. The idea of a chainsaw within our minds is a violent one, reinforced through other media and art that has been created surrounding them. And yet, it is about a man who's made from chainsaws. This violent idea is juxtaposed with an absurd concept and motifs that fit within that of a superhero. For example, Iron Man, Spider-Man, Batman. And juxtaposition is one of Fujimoto's greatest strengths. Placing two almost opposite concepts together elevates both of them because of their contrast, and Fujimoto is a master of utilizing these heightened feelings. He loves writing absurd, creative concepts for his stories, which helps him stand out from the current series within Shonen Jump. This is a major factor in why I believe Chainsaw Man managed to garner the popularity it did, its concept alone standing in contrast with other series, easily drawing in new readers because of its difference. However, it's one thing to hook a reader, but it's another challenge to keep a reader. And once again, Fujimoto does this through juxtaposition. When writing the absurd, many writers end up using bathos as a crutch. Bathos is the anticlimactic effect of changing from a serious tone to a ridiculous one. It is one that's often used out of shame. You can see this a lot in Marvel movies, which mostly feel embarrassed to be based off comic books, ruining moods by trying to swing them into comedy. Writing with genuinity is scary because it leaves you vulnerable, and so many stray away from it. Fujimoto is someone who takes these outlandish concepts and takes them completely seriously. He gives them the emotional value they deserve, which elevates the piece as a whole. Just because they're not close to the norm doesn't mean they don't deserve to be taken seriously. So in a series where a protagonist is a kid whose whole goal is just to have sex, and has to turn into a bunch of chainsaws to get it, surrounded by blood and guts, we still get to see extremely human and empathetic moments. The juxtaposition of insane concepts and genuine humanity makes the characters that Fujimoto writes feel even more alive. He could have easily made the protagonist an unfunny pervert who just goes around killing devils the whole series, but instead he dives deeper and creates a story that explores human desire. To analyze how Fujimoto uses juxtaposition, I like to look at 3 of his written works. A Couple of Clucking Chickens Were Still Kicking in the Schoolyard, his first published one-shot from 2011, Fire Punch, his first ever full-length series, and Chainsaw Man, the series that launched him into the mainstream. I love analyzing the first works of well-known artists. It lets you see their styles develop and show you where they started from, which has always fascinated me. Seeing them when they were more amateurish makes them feel more grounded. A Couple of Clucking Chickens is no different. Our story begins with a student waking up to go to school. However, the student looks inhuman. In fact, everyone in this world seems monstrous despite acting and performing very human tasks. That's because all of them are aliens. A war had broken out between aliens and humans, and because of the aliens' ability to transform, they wiped out all of humanity. Taking a liking to human culture, the aliens had to emulate it after eating all the humans. Once the alien we were introduced to arrives at school, he goes to feed the school chickens. But instead of chickens, we find 2 humans, our protagonist Yuto and a girl named Ami, disguised as chickens. Apparently aliens don't find chickens tasty, so the 2 of them have been safe for now. However, the alien we first saw, Yohei, has found out that they are human, but instead of wanting to eat them, he decides he wants to help them. He learned of humans hiding in the mountains, and he wants to help them get there. But their path is blocked by a new alien transfer student who has the taste for chickens. As Yohei defends them, Ami's mask comes off, and everyone sees that she is human. This prompts Yohei to grab both Yuto and Ami and run towards the mountains, but as he runs, a police officer comes crashing down, killing him and leaving Yuto unable to move. Here is where I was getting a bit disappointed with the one-shot. For something so short, it felt like we were focusing on a little too many characters. So it felt like we were getting no characterization of the human characters who were supposed to be our focal point. Combined with Fujimoto's usual fast pace, everything until here felt very emotionally detached. And now, the alien we had met at the beginning was dead, and Yuto was now left broken. It felt as if Fujimoto simply came up with a wacky concept of aliens pretending to be students and nothing else. And then, it happened. As the police officer raises his fist to crush both Ami and Yuto, as Ami cries for Yuto to get up, Yuto thinks back to the day he decided he would protect Ami no matter what. 6 months ago, when the aliens first attacked, Ami watches her schools killed and eaten while they were practicing for a school play. Only one alien remained, and she confronted him, asking him why he killed her classmates. He simply gives the reason that he did the same thing that humans do to cows and pigs. Ami yells back by that logic, it would be okay for her to eat him. Unsure how to answer this, he knocks her out. He was rattled. What was it like to be on the other side, to be in a human's shoes? Using his special alien ability, he transforms into a human, calling himself Yuto, and stayed with her. He protected her, and in that time he learned to care for her. Before the police officer's fist can connect, Yuto stops it, revealing his true alien form. He scares Ami away, making her run for the mountains. Then he turns to the police officer, making one final stand. In the end, all the human survivors on the mountain end up dying, and even Yuto himself is killed by the officer. But this isn't a nihilistic story about how nothing we do matters, nor is it an absurd story about aliens going to high school. It's about an alien named Yuto who managed to learn how to love and care for a human. Reading this one-shot, I can see why it was nominated for the December Jump SQ Monthly Award. It's also impressive that it made it that far considering it was Fujimoto's first ever submitted one-shot. And even in the beginning, Fujimoto utilized juxtaposing insane concepts of human empathy, creating an experience that enhances the emotions felt within the story. We can also view other ideas that are heavily utilized within Fujimoto's more current works here. The breakneck pace of the story, the brief and intense cuts of violence, and characters we have grown fond of dying unceremoniously. While I don't think it's as great as what will come after, I still think this is a great one-shot that shows just how much Fujimoto's writing has grown and yet stayed the same. Now let's shift over to Fujimoto's first published series, Fire Punch. Within this series, he did not hold back with the insane concepts. The world of Fire Punch takes place in a distant future, when the Earth has been frozen over by the powers of the Ice Witch. In this world, some people are blessed, being born with special powers. The rumored Ice Witch is believed to be the strongest of them all. Our protagonist is Agni, who has the blessing to be able to regenerate after any injury, and he lives in a small village of elderly people alongside his sister, Luna. These two share an interesting relationship with each other that siblings should not be having. In order to have food for the village, Agni cuts off his arms and regenerates them over and over again so that he can feed everyone with his severed arms. One day, their village is visited by a group of soldiers led by a man named Doma, that blessed with the ability to set anything on fire, and that fire cannot be extinguished until the one on fire has died. He isn't fond of Agni's cannibalism plan, so he sets the entire village on fire. But because of Agni's regeneration, he can't die. But that also means Doma's flames can never be extinguished. Now constantly burning to death and regenerating, Agni sets on the mission to avenge his sister and kill Doma. And that is the inciting incident of Fire Punch. The idea of Fire Punch is something that only Fujimoto could come up with. And what's most interesting about the story is that it sets itself up as a basic revenge plot, but it evolves into an ever-expanding plot which revolves around a giant tree, a girl obsessed with making a new Star Wars movie, and another girl who looks like his sister but actually isn't. But technically, since it's not his sister, he could do things he wanted to do with his sister without it being morally wrong. And I promise you, that isn't even the surface of how insane Fire Punch gets. And yet, it is one of the most human stories I've ever read, something that emanates with empathy and kindness. Fire Punch is one of Fujimoto's strongest works of juxtaposition. In fact, there are so many examples within Fire Punch I want to talk about, but for the sake of time, I'll be focusing on one of my favorites, Togata. The world that Fire Punch sets up is an extremely cruel one. It's not clear from the summary of its first chapter I gave, it's a story that tries to make you miserable, especially in the first couple of chapters. Almost every character seems to be evil. Murder and assault are simply how the world runs, and Togata is a character who completely understands this. We're first introduced to Togata as a woman who's obsessed with making their own movie, but they aren't just any other person in the world. Just like Agni, they have a regeneration blessing, which has let them live around 300 years. And in our first few interactions with Togata, they come off as a complete sociopath. When on the train recording their movie, they actually encourage the guards to assault a girl named Neneto, as it would make a good scene for their film. Shortly after, they kill all the guards nonchalantly. Togata treats everything like a game. No matter how much blood or violence there is, it's all something like watching a TV show for them. We see this more when Togata convinces Agni to be the main character of his film. As Agni trains to become someone who's more suited to be a protagonist, Togata teases him about teaching obscenities in English, which they had learned from watching movies. With all of this, Fujimoto set up their character extremely clearly. An all-powerful, immature sociopath, who doesn't care much for the world around them. It's an extremely strong and notable personality. So when we watch Fujimoto dismantle that, it heightens the emotions we experience when reading. This all starts when a blessed man who can read minds reads Togata's and tells Agni that they are lying to him. Togata isn't a woman, he's a man trapped in a woman's body. To open up about things that you did not make apparent about yourself is hard. It exposes yourself and your truest self. It leaves you vulnerable. And in that moment, Togata was left exposed and hurt. It wasn't his choice to reveal his actual gender identity to Agni himself. It was exposed by some outside force, all out of his own control. He runs away, and Agni follows. This character who had once seen shielded by animosity and immaturity is now left bare and naked. And now forced to open up because his mind was unrightfully read, He tells Agni about his struggle and trauma. He tells them how he can't even have surgical operations to change his body because it will just regenerate. This ability that once seemed like a blessing, granting him immortality, is now revealed to be a prison. This moment is one of my favorites in the entirety of Fire Punch. The emotions of the scene are enhanced because of the juxtaposition that had come before. Seeing Togata push Agni away after being exposed and seeing him hurts us. And what follows is something intimate. Agni has the mentality of a child because of the trauma he went through, years of his life being robbed away by Doma. He's someone who doesn't really understand what Togata is going through. He doesn't completely get it. But even still, he tries to comfort him by being there for him. Because even though he doesn't understand, he still cares for Togata. He still understands he's hurt and wants to help. And it's such a deeply intimate and human moment. It's an evolution of their relationship as they begin to understand each other on a deeper level. This is what lies beyond Fire Punch's extreme violence and cruelty and absurdity. It's humanity. Finally, let's look at Fujimoto's current ongoing series, Chainsaw Man. From his first one-shot to then Fire Punch, we can see the vast improvement of Fujimoto's writing as he becomes experienced within his field. And Chainsaw Man feels as if Fujimoto has taken all his strengths and quirks, his utilization and juxtaposing the absurd with the humane, his breakneck pace, and violent yet lovable characters, and perfected them into fitting smoothly into one story. The story shares some similarities with Fire Punch. We follow Denji, a down-on-his-luck teenager who's racked up an absurd amount of debt from the Yakuza, passed down to him from his father. Now, barely having enough money to have a slice of bread, he's forced to work for them as a devil hunter. With the help of his pet chainsaw devil named Pochita, he slowly begins to try and pay off the insurmountable debt. However, when the Yakuza make a contract with the zombie devil, they stab Denji in the back, killing him and throwing his dismembered body into a dumpster. But Pochita gives him a second chance at life, thanking him for giving him love, taking the place of Denji's heart and reviving him. Now, Denji can turn into the powerful and immortal Chainsaw Man, cutting down everything in his path. With Chainsaw Man, instead of focusing on a particular part of the story, I want to analyze how Fujimoto wrote the protagonist, Denji. Denji is not like your average shonen protagonist. In order to embody the themes that are popular within Shonen Jump, shonen protagonists are usually kind, empathetic, and heroic. They are written to be as likable as possible, with goals that are usually noble. But as you go through Chainsaw Man, Denji is not really any of these. He's abrasive, violent, selfish. His main motive in the story is to get with a girl, any girl really, but particularly Makima, the first one to ever give him attention. His mere existence stands in stark contrast to the other protagonists around him. And this abrasive, rude protagonist, who seems to only be a pervert, can turn some people away from the story. I remember when the Chainsaw Man anime first dropped, many people simply wrote him off as an unlikable character, who simply fell into the unfunny pervert trope found in many shonen, and they couldn't understand what people saw in him. But as you dive deeper into this character and into the story, you learn more about him and the depths of his actions. Throughout the series, through his harsh and unfiltered nature, we see glimpses of him questioning himself and his feelings. He wonders why he doesn't feel guilt when he sees the people around him die. He questions if he lost his humanity when fusing with Pochita, but he pushes these feelings down and ignores them, continuing in his everyday actions, his own response to the trauma that he suffered. He's not simply a rude, unlikable character, he's an immature teenager learning how to grow in a world that only seems to hurt him. In his life, all he had was a deadbeat father. He never got to go to school, never got to have a normal life and learn these basic things within our lives. His sexual desire for women comes from the loneliness and isolation he had suffered all his life, and it's the only way he knows how to express wanting intimacy with others. And it makes it even more potent when he learns that there are other forms of intimacy in the world, something he never got to learn before, something he never got to experience before. We see this in his relationship with Power, where he initially desires her sexually, but as the story continues and evolves, he learns about familial love, and his view of her changes when he swears to help her every action, helping her take a shower and change her clothes after they came back from hell, and she wasn't able to do these tasks herself. He questions why he doesn't feel that sexual desire that was there before. It's such an empathetic and heartfelt moment, the experience of someone learning a new form of love, learning the beauty of family. It's such a human moment I've rarely seen in any other form of media, and it's inside a series called Chainsaw Man. Denji is the perfect embodiment of Fujimoto's juxtaposition and writing. Someone who on surface level seems like a crude, uncaring annoyance, but looking deeper is actually the core of an empathetic story of learning how to love. Fujimoto gives us these insane and crude concepts and combines them with such heart and empathy. And perhaps what makes Fujimoto's insane yet beautiful writing work is that life is also like that. Life is rough and awkward. Not all our goals are noble ones. Sometimes they're absurdly stupid, but that makes them human. Behind all the chaos and uncertainty, there's the beauty and kindness within humanity. And Fujimoto encapsulates that perfectly.